Introducing the Book of Giants, a banned text recovered from the desert caves of Qumran that claims to reveal exactly how the Nephilim were bred. You've probably heard of the Nephilim, those giants who appear briefly in Genesis 6. But what if there was a much longer story behind them, one that names them individually and transcribes their dreams? And why was it buried for almost 2,000 years? In this video, I want to take you inside one of the strangest scrolls in the Dead Sea collection and explore the lost mythology of the Nephilim. If you've ever opened Genesis 6, you'll know the story is told in a remarkably brief way. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. The Nephilim were on earth in those days. And that's pretty much it. Half a paragraph, then the text moves on to Noah and the flood. For almost 2,000 years, that was all anyone in the Western tradition had to go on. The Catholic and Protestant traditions kept the longer story out of their canons, and so did the Eastern Orthodox churches. But there was a much longer story. We just lost it, and then we found it again. The story I'm about to tell you involves Bedouin shepherds, a Persian prophet smuggling texts along the Silk Road, and a Polish-born scholar and a French priest scholar piecing together fragments in 1971. But to begin, we need to head out into the Judean desert. You see, in 1947, a Bedouin shepherd named Muhammad Ed Dib was looking for a lost goat near the cliffs above the Dead Sea. He stumbled into a cave and found clay jars, sealed and undisturbed, containing tightly wrapped scrolls in a script he couldn't read. He sold them in Bethlehem for 7 Jordanian pounds, worth a few $100s today. Within a decade, archaeologists had searched 11 caves around Qumran and recovered something like 15,000 fragments from 900 separate manuscripts. Now, among those fragments was something the world had never seen before. 9 separate manuscripts, all written in the same hand and the same vocabulary, all telling pieces of one lost story. They got assigned a catalog number, with 4Q531 being one of the most important. And they sat in storage for years before anyone realized they belonged together. That work fell to a Polish scholar named Józef Milik, who finally gave the manuscripts a name in 1971, the Book of Giants. His full translation, published by Oxford in 1976, ran to more than 400 pages. That volume is the missing chapter of Genesis 6, and here's what it actually says. The Book of Giants opens with the descent. According to the parallel text in 1st Enoch, which comes from the same Second Temple Jewish tradition, 200 angels, known as the Watchers, gathered on the slopes of Mount Hermon. Their leader was a chieftain named Shemyaza. Before they descended, they swore an oath together, an oath that bound all 200 of them to what came next, so that no single angel could later be blamed. The oath goes like this, and they all answered him and said, "Let us all swear an oath and bind one another with imprecations not to abandon this plan, but to carry out the deed." So they came down, took human women as wives, and began to teach. You see, this is the part that often gets cut short. The breeding was not just biological. The Watchers were teaching the women as they were procreating with them. Each Watcher brought one forbidden craft into the human line. Azazel, the first one named in 1st Enoch 8, taught the making of swords and shields and the working of metals. He also taught the humans how to extract gold from the earth and shape it into jewelry. Then comes a Mezerak, who taught enchantments and root cutting. Armaros taught the resolution of enchantments, which means his specialty was essentially undoing other watchers' spell work. It's a strange little corporate hierarchy up there. Barakel taught astrology, Kokabel the constellations, Ezekiel the knowledge of the clouds, and the list goes on. It's basically the world's most dangerous after-school program. Except instead of math tutors, you have angels teaching kids how to forge weapons and read the stars. And the women, in this telling, were not just passive victims. They learned. They became the first transmitters of forbidden knowledge into the human population. Then, they conceived. And what they bore was not exactly a normal child. The text in 4Q531 describes the offspring as monstrous. They had mixed features the scribes could not name in a single word. First, Enoch 7 measures them at 3,000 cubits tall, which works out to roughly 2 kilometers. To put that in perspective, that's about 5 Eiffel Towers stacked on top of each other. Now, to be clear, that figure is almost certainly symbolic. A real being 2 kilometers tall would collapse under its own weight before it could even stand up. But the number is meant to convey something. The original audience understood the Nephilim as essentially the size of small mountains. What they did once they were born is the disturbing part. They were always hungry. First, they consumed everything the earth produced. When the harvests ran out, they turned on the cattle, then on the wild animals. Eventually, they began to eat each other. And then, they began to eat the people who had raised them. I have read this passage in Milik's edition a dozen times, and I still don't know exactly how to feel about it. It is not the supernatural part that gets me. It is the matter-of-fact tone the scribe uses to describe children eating the people who raised them, almost like he's filing a court report. There is no editorializing or outrage, just a cold inventory of what they consumed in order. Now, the most interesting thing about the Book of Giants is that it gives the giants their own voices. This is something that does not happen anywhere else in biblical or apocryphal literature. The Bible treats the Nephilim as a problem to be solved. The Book of Giants treats them as individuals with names and dreams and conversations among themselves. So let me introduce you. There's Ohyah, the son of Shemyaza. There's his brother Hahyah. Then we have Mahaway. And then, in one of the strangest crossovers in all of ancient literature, we get Gilgamesh. Yes, that Gilgamesh. The same name as the Mesopotamian king from the epic that bears his name. He shows up in the Book of Giants as one of the Nephilim, alongside another Mesopotamian name, Humbaba. There's also Adambish. You see, the scribes who wrote this were clearly aware of older Mesopotamian traditions. The Book of Giants is a fusion text. To a scribe in the 3rd century BC, all those pre-flood giant stories probably felt connected, even if the names came from different cultures. Ohyah falls asleep one night and has a dream. He sees a stone tablet being washed clean in water. He cannot interpret it. He brings it to his brother Hahyah, who tells him to ask their father Shemyaza. Shemyaza cannot interpret it either. So Mahaway is dispatched, and the text explicitly says he flies to find Enoch, the only human who walks with God. That's right, Mahaway flies. The Book of Giants does not explain how. It just says he flies, and Enoch interprets the dream. The stone tablet stands for the human race. The water stands for judgment. Everything the Watchers and the Nephilim have built is about to be erased. Hahyah has a separate vision in another fragment, a great garden uprooted with only one tree left standing. That tree is Noah. Everything else, including the giants, will burn. The giants understand what is coming. They keep killing anyway. Some of them drink to forget. Others fight each other. In the Manichaean version of the story, which was preserved in Central Asia long after the Western tradition forgot it, Gilgamesh refuses to believe the dream and challenges his brothers to a duel. It is hard reading this not to feel a strange sympathy for them. They did not choose to be born. The dream sequences read like grief, and there are moments when it is not clear whose side the scribe is on. So, why is none of this in your Bible? That's a fair question. You see, the Council of Laodicea in 363 of the Common Era drew up a list of approved scriptures and left the Book of Giants off it. 4 years later, Athanasius of Alexandria fixed the New Testament canon in his festal letter of 367. By the time Jerome translated the Vulgate at the end of the 4th century, the Book of Giants was effectively dead in the Western tradition, but it did not stop existing. You see, the Manichaeans, a Persian religious movement founded by the prophet Mani in the 3rd century AD, picked it up and translated it. Their copies traveled the Silk Road, surviving in Middle Persian, Sogdian, Uyghur, and Coptic. The German philologist W.B. Henning published the first reconstruction of those Manichaean fragments in 1943, a small volume titled, brilliantly, The Book of the Giants. Henning thought he was looking at a Manichaean original. Then the Dead Sea Scrolls came out of the ground, and the Qumran fragments matched the Manichaean text. Not word for word, but story for story. So, we have a text that was written in Aramaic by Jewish scribes before the time of Christ, translated by Persian Manichaeans, smuggled across Central Asia, recovered by a German philologist in 1943, and independently confirmed by Bedouin shepherds in 1947. If that does not sound like the plot of an academic Indiana Jones film, I do not know what does. So, what does the Book of Giants actually say about how the Nephilim were bred? In my reading, the scribes saw the breeding as a process, and not a single event. There is the oath on Mount Hermon, the choosing of the women, the teaching of forbidden arts, the conception, and then generations of giants reproducing among themselves and spreading the corruption through the human line until, in the words of Genesis 6:11, the earth is filled with violence. It is not biology in the modern sense. It is a deliberate corruption of the human line, and the scribes clearly believed the Watchers knew exactly what they were doing. Although honestly, the text is not entirely unanimous on that. In some of the Manichaean fragments, the Watchers themselves seem to grieve once their sons begin killing each other. Maybe even the scribes were of two minds. The flood, in this telling, is the only solution. The Book of Giants is, in my opinion, one of the most unusual texts to survive from the Second Temple period. It takes a story that the Bible compresses into half a paragraph and expands it into a sprawling mythology with named characters and recorded dreams. The Nephilim in the Book of Giants are not just monsters. They are tragic figures who know they are doomed and keep going anyway. You see, what I find most interesting is the question of who exactly wrote this and why they thought it was important enough to copy 9 times. Whoever they were, they wanted us to know the names and read the dreams. That's a strange editorial choice for a religious text, and it makes me want to keep reading. There's one more thing about the Book of Giants that I keep going back to. The text says, Mahaway flew. Just that. He flew. There is no explanation, no metaphor flag, no apology from the scribe. The simplest reading is symbolic, but the scribe gives no indication he meant it that way. I have not made up my mind, honestly. Maybe I never will. Next week, we are going to walk through all 200 names of the Watchers and look at the specific forbidden craft, each of them brought into the human line. Some are obvious, others are unsettling. Don't miss it. If you have enjoyed this one, give it a like, subscribe for the rest of the series, and let me know in the comments. Do you think the Book of Giants should have made it into the Bible? I'd love to hear what you think. And a huge thank you to the patrons supporting this channel. You make this possible. See you next time. Goodbye.